Thank you again, and yeah, do check out the Ponce Room. I think they did a great job with that space, just how it embraces the street and it kind of opens up the street. So thank you again. Peachtree Street. It goes without saying that Peachtree Street is not just another street that Midtown Alliance is planning for. It's kind of where Atlanta came to be. It's home to most of our cherished places in Atlanta, from the cultural to Fox Theater here next door, to the High Museum and Woodruff Art Center and ASO, institutions like SCAD, the Federal Reserve Bank, Emory University Hospital to the south here. Many of our best office towers are right here. And we've got a quickly growing vertical community of vertical neighborhood that really, particularly south of 10th Street, is really adding some excitement to the district that we didn't have 15 or 20 years ago. So we are in the very beginning of this process of re-envisioning Peachtree Street. And this is the first of many opportunities to weigh in. So if you're not able to get a question answered tonight, there's many more opportunities. Peachtree Street, we've seen a lot of some of our favorite places come and go on Peachtree Street. The Stein Club, Back Street, Cotton Club, Club Kaya, so many more that we can, but I think what's important is we're not going to recreate those places, but we can create the kinds of environments that can support places that we love. And I think that's one of our challenges with this project is creating a place that puts people first, that creates environments for it to have active street life, active storefronts. And so that's what, at a very high level, that's what we're talking about tonight. So with that, I want to just talk a little bit about the timeline for this effort, and then introduce the team. That'll come back, right? Timeline. We are just a couple of months into about a 6-month planning effort. It's a pretty quick initial planning effort for Peachtree between North Avenue and basically the Buford Spring Connector ramps north of Pershing Point. So we're going to look at the whole end-to-end of Peachtree in Midtown. So we expect to wrap up this effort in Q2 of next year and have basically a vision, a plan, a concept, and hopefully an implementation plan for how do we go from planning and a concept to a project and a build project. The City of Atlanta has allocated close to $5 million for Peachtree Street in Midtown. They've allocated another $5 million for Peachtree downtown. And so we're obviously going to be partnering with the city and our friends at Central Atlanta Progress Downtown so that we're coordinated. But we want to tee up a project to be able to take advantage of those funds. Depending on what the project is, those funds will likely not get us all the way, and so there may be federal money that needs to be applied for and brought to the table. That's the basic timeline. We are going to do questions more informally, so at the end of this presentation, our team, the consultant team, will be here to, if you want to ask us questions, give us comments on what you saw. We'd love to hear them. So I'd like to introduce the team really briefly. Eric Bishop is right behind me. Eric is our project manager. He's with Kimley Horn. They've got a local office here, engineering and design firm. Eric's been involved with us for 25 years, particularly with Peachtree and other streets in Midtown. So he's got a wealth of history and knowledge about Midtown and about Peachtree in particular. And he's a landscape architect. He's got a great design sense. So we're really happy to have him. Paired with them is a firm called Snowhetta. And I will let Eric and their team introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they bring to the table. But we're really excited to have Snøhetta here. They bring a global perspective to places, and so I think that's going to really add to how we think about Peachtree. So I'm going to get out of the way and let them take it over. So Eric, to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. While I'm doing this, I'm going to see if we can get a presentation going here, because we'll be huddled around a very small screen otherwise. Yeah, so as Dan mentioned, I'm Eric Bishop. I've been working on Peachtree, around Peachtree for 25 years now, ever since I graduated school. I did the first designs, the schematic designs for Peachtree all the way through here, and then carried the construction drawings forward for the first phases as well as the second phases. When we saw that this project was coming out, we felt that we had a very good, deep understanding of what Peachtree is, what Peachtree can be. But oftentimes, we're a little bit too close to our projects, right? So we almost live and breathe them too much. So what we really wanted to do was bring in a different voice, an outside voice. And that's really where we brought in Michelle Delk here with Snøhetta, and Darlene, who's our IT person at the moment, Darlene Montgomery. And I'll let them introduce what Snøhetta is. It's not a person. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But as Dan was mentioning, the thrust of this project is really, it's taking a look at what Peachtree can be. Taking some of the things that are there that are really good right now and figuring out a way to amplify those and create more places for people. So I'm going to go through really the case for change, the reason we're looking at Peachtree in general, where the opportunities lie, and then between Michelle and Darlene, they're going to give us some ideas of what happens in other places. What are the things that we can think about from the outside, but then as outsiders looking at something that they're not familiar with and being able to see the great parts about it that maybe we don't see anymore. So I'll let Michelle talk about Snøhetta.
Thank you, Eric. And Dan, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Michelle Delk. I'm a partner with Snøhetta, also a landscape architect. Our group here tonight, Darlene, myself, and James in the back of the room waving at all of you, we're all based in our New York City office. But Snøhetta is a global practice. We have offices in many places around the world. We are also what we think of as transdisciplinary design, which basically means we have different designers that practice different types of architecture, landscape architecture, interiors, branding. But what's important, or what I think that brings to these conversations, is that it brings different lenses and different experiences from the different people and places around the world that we've had the opportunity to work with. We also very much rely on, appreciate, and respect the knowledge of our local partners and friends and colleagues. We by no means are the expert on your community, but we get to listen. We're very curious. We really do value and enjoy conversations and learning from others, and then sharing what we've learned. So I will say one more thing, and then I'll pass it over, and we'll actually get to the good stuff. So while we aren't a part of your community, I am married to someone who was born and raised here in Atlanta, so I've heard a lot of his opinions about Peachtree Street. But I really look forward to, we'll share some thoughts, and I look forward to hearing from all of you. So on to Darlene.
Well, now to Eric. Oh, okay.
Somebody else is going to talk.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm Darlene Montgomery. I'm a landscape architect and one of the directors at Snøhetta, and have been happily focused on Peachtree Street and kind of looking, as you'll see tonight, at stripping away all the kind of stuff that's on the street that you don't even realize that you pass by every day, and kind of looking at the space itself and the opportunities. And so we'll come back to you and be able to fill that in, but this is a start of a conversation with all of you.
All right, so I'll try to walk through some of the history, and really why this project, why we're talking about it now. So many of you probably participated in the Public Life Action Plan that concluded last year. Show of hands of folks that participated in that. This is really kind of one of the first projects rolling out of that. What that action plan really began to identify is that there's a lot of good that we have in Midtown, right? There's a lot of wonderful places, but there's certain things missing. So when I started working on Peachtree back in, I guess it was 1997 at this point in time, the street was very different, right? We were doing a project that was about putting sidewalks together. We were doing a project about creating a thread that began to identify place. And what we've seen, and you guys have all witnessed probably, is over this last 23, 25 years, that there's been a lot of growth that's occurred throughout the district. And I'm just going to flip through these really quickly because it's not really that relevant when something happened, but kind of where we are now. So we're at a very different point in time than when we originally looked at Peachtree. A massive amount of developments occurred, but there's also been a lot of investment by the Midtown Alliance within the district, creating a lot of infrastructure systems. And we're now coming up on a point in time with Peachtree where it's a good moment to look back. These are just some statistics that we pulled out of the recent development, and a lot of what we see here is really it's about growth of residential. It's about growth of office, hospitality, other environments, and retail space. And really, Midtown's almost becoming this near mature urban district in a lot of ways. It's a lot different than when I first moved here. And it's getting closer to a point in time where you would expect a more vibrant streetscape, a lot more people out on the street on a more regular basis. And one of the questions that we asked initially is really, where are all the people? In a lot of ways, Peachtree has this cyclical event time, right? So it's like people going to work, people going to lunch, people coming back from work, people walking their dogs. Those are kind of those cadences, that rhythm of Peachtree, but it's not kind of this common thread that there are a lot of people out on the street. And there's a number of different ways that we could look at this. The rise of convenience might be something that's diminishing the people being out on the street. I took this picture walking up here to actually check out the space, and there's 5 Uber Eats drivers picking up stuff from Fresh to Order, along with an Amazon truck delivering something from halfway around the world 6 hours after someone asked for it. There's also changes in behavior, right? The pandemic modified a lot for us. So there's a lot of work from home attitude. There's a lot, maybe less people going to work. There's a lot less participation in the public realm that way. There's also some hostility in the edges out there. Dan took this picture. I love it. It was right out in front of AT&T near 5th Street. There's 5 signs right there that tell you all the things you can't do in that space, which is fascinating because I've got an empty retail space and an empty retail space that are directly adjacent to this. So some of this kind of hostility is really opportunity. It's like, how can we look at those storefronts and look at this space and figure out a way to fill those gaps and create more energy and life? I'd say there's also an issue with the way we built Midtown, right? So the common experience for a lot of people in Midtown is, I'm walking down a street, it's retail. Next thing you know, I got 6 stories of parking before I get to a residential unit. And that's where people are at. We've got highly amenitized sky parks throughout the district that almost make it where you don't necessarily have to leave your building, right? It's that point where I can get everything delivered to me. And I've got all this great stuff up here. Why would I ever want to come out to the street? And that's really the question that we're going to be asking you guys tonight, is what is going to bring us to the street? The beginning part of that discussion, I think it goes back to last year's Midtown Community Survey. And, I think we're all aware that Midtown's a great place. It hits high marks in a lot of different areas, but the 5 that I've got highlighted on the left side here, those are really the deficiencies that survey pointed out. You know, bikeability was something that was not seen as very favorable within the district. Sustainability, which is a conversation that I'd love to have with you guys this evening because it means so many different things. That's not seen as something that's really reflected within the community itself. And then something that also came out of the Public Life Action Plan is really the empty storefronts, right? It's the shopping and dining options, night spots. Those things that you would really expect to be able to take off with the number of residents we have here, along with the daytime population that comes in for work. Family friendly is another thing that I think is something that we can hit within the public realm as we talk about these opportunities. And then safety being another one, which is, it's a big word, right? Here, I think some of this relates to crime and some of the perceptions around crime. I think there's also a lot to do with safety as far as the way you organize a street and the way you put together a public realm that begins to reflect the attitudes of a community and really what they prioritize within an area. So I'm gonna pause real briefly on this because Dan stole some of my thunder. We'll talk about the opportunities in a conversation with what the findings of the Public Life Action Plan were. But I think at the base level, what that project highlights or what it really talks about is almost the loss of humanity in some ways, right? With all of this vertical development, with all of these changes that we've experienced, my favorite noodle shop, the best brunch spot in all of Atlanta, if you ask me. I mean, these sorts of losses are actually, they're significant, I think. They change the way that we operate within a place. They change the way that we look for community within a space. So what we need to think about is really the road in some ways. That's where we're going to begin. We're going to talk about the road. And then we're going to expand, Michelle and Darlene will expand the conversation out beyond the road. So the interesting thing was when you look at Peachtree in general, you know, we've had a huge amount of growth throughout the district. We've had a decline over time in average daily trips throughout the district. You know, this 26% is a kind of a bulk average, but you see these trend lines that are kind of always moving downward throughout the district. And likely one of the reasons for this is that we've rebalanced the district. So it used to be a lot of institutional, it used to be a lot of office, with some residential scattered in. You know, we've got the more mature residential neighborhoods around us, but the growth of residential within the district itself has likely taken a lot of those trips away. So when we think about that rebalancing that's occurred throughout the district, what we're going to think about is how we rebalance Peachtree in general. So some of the safety issues that we see on the street, you guys witness this every day. If you're on Peachtree, the illegal loading, constant, it causes a lot of issues. It causes weaving. It changes expectations, and also it makes a little bit of a hostile environment. Speed. Originally, I was going to throw like Fast and Furious up here because we've all seen like the Dodge Chargers and all those things kind of screaming up and down the street. I threw in the General Lee because there actually is an episode of Dukes of Hazzard that was filmed in Midtown, and it's a chase scene. Find it if you can. But when we have additional asphalt, we've got all of this space, and cars aren't using it. It's not being used for something else. It encourages people to speed. And that's one of the things that we want to think about how we get rid of. So when we get a fast corridor, then people that are on other vehicles along the street don't feel comfortable in that space, right? So folks on bikes, folks on scooters, I'm not going to feel comfortable riding down Peachtree if I've got cars that are kind of weaving and jetting up and down. And in turn, what that does is it takes a lot of those operations and moves them to the sidewalk, where we actually have the least, or maybe the most vulnerable is the best way to put it, form of transportation, which is the walker, the person who is actually physically walking. So in broad terms, our project is really looking at, you know, the Brookwood crossing at 85, at the north, all the way down to North Avenue. And we're gonna truncate this a little bit, because once we get north of West Peachtree, we get into a little bit of a strange land with GDOT and some other operational things. So for simplicity, what we wanted to do was really kind of focus from West Peachtree southward. And these are the current lane configurations that we have throughout the district. Not all of them, but in general terms, this is the way the road is put together, right? So as we're looking out here, basically from North Avenue down to Peachtree Place, we've got 2 lanes in each direction. We've got a 4-lane road. Once we get north of Peachtree Place, we pick up a center turn lane most of the time. Once we get north of 15th Street, then we start to add on on-street parking. So what we're talking about tonight and what we found within our early analysis is that there really is an opportunity to put Peachtree on a diet. So going from a 4-lane roadway, 2 lanes in each direction, to a single travel lane in each direction with a center turn lane. This is supported based on the volumes. It's supported based on the facts that we need to slow traffic down and we need to create a safer condition throughout the district. Now, that's a generic cross-section. We need to look at all the intersections too. There are a lot of different ways that we need to improve safety conditions, but in broad terms, this idea of a 3-lane cross-section is what we're looking at. So going back to the challenges of what we got out there right now, this is just looking at the most constrained section that we have, basically right through the residential area of Midtown. 2 lanes each direction. We've got the illegal loading, happens everywhere. We've got the 2 cars that are trying to take a left in opposition to one another. We've got a cyclist that's weaving around the van. We've got a car that's trying to weave around the left turn that they're going to crash together. And then one thing you notice with this sort of a configuration is you can't really see the left turn, the cars that are beyond the left turn in front of you, right? So that guy where you see that dark triangle, that cone of vision really narrows down. You have to pay attention to what's over there so you can hit the gap and make your left turn. This is actually how I got hit by a car in Midtown. And I don't know how many people here have been hit by a car in Midtown. It's not fun. I'm sure many of you have actually been close to getting hit by a car in Midtown. So this really is an inherently dangerous condition. The advantage, once we look at going to a 3-lane situation, you'll note that the illegal loading isn't happening here anymore. The supposition and the thought is, if I'm going to be able to park on a curb lane and not impede someone behind me, then I'm going to do it, right? No one's going to stop me. If all of a sudden I'm blocking traffic, that's not something that I feel free to do. As soon as I align the 2 left turns together, what you end up with is a better situation where I can monitor not only the oncoming traffic to hit that gap, but I can also pay attention to the pedestrians in the crosswalk. So these are the things that really is an approach we're taking for the project. We've got the possibility, the ability to really take Peachtree and narrow it down, which then really asks the question, what can we do with that extra space, right? So if we think about 4 lanes to 3 lanes in this portion of the district, that's 10 feet, 15 feet if you include the furniture zone. Once we get further and further north, we're picking up more and more space. So it's more and more opportunity. And with that opportunity, really is where we're going. So you guys have noticed probably that you had some postcards on your chair when you came in. One of the things that we would like for you guys to do as you hear some of the conversation that Michelle and Darlene are about to take us down, we'd love to have you jot down notes. We'd love to have you tell us what it is that would bring you back to Peachtree to spend time, not just to walk down the street, but to physically spend time. And then other ideas that you may have, great places from around the world, different things that you feel are really missing from the streetscape in Midtown. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you and let you talk about the big
All right, let's see. So as we, so sorry, I don't usually like slides with lots of words, but I did want to share just very briefly, this is an excerpt from a group that I worked with over the past year or so in New York called the Urban Design Forum. And I was a co-chair of an exercise for the year called Streets Ahead. And the reason that we wanted to share this is that we sort of had the luxury of essentially inviting a lot of different people from the community and communities all around New York, as well as people working in design and policy making and a variety of voices and ideas to essentially challenge ourselves to think about the future of streets in the city. And as we've been working here on Peachtree, we certainly think some of the ideas and the ways of thinking. Every city is different, every street is different, but some of the ways of thinking about it can be shared. Because again, what we were thinking about, and especially during and since the pandemic, is really how can we share space more? And that's what this is getting at. Roads take up a lot of space in our cities. Many cities like New York and Atlanta and others, it's as much as 25% of the land area is devoted to streets. So how can we make them and think about them as places where we share, where we bring joy, where we gather, where we can move and get where we need to go, but that it's not only about that. And so the lens that we looked at this, that we wanted to share with you tonight and invite you to sort of ponder, is we call it the 5 C's, partly because you can remember C's if you know all the words start with that. But the idea was that streets do many, many things. So they certainly are places for mobility and moving to and from, and we need to connect. But for example, if we start at the top with commerce, commerce is such an important part of the vitality and energy, as Eric was sharing, like going to and from your favorite restaurant or getting to your local cleaner or wherever you're going. There's an active life that needs to be supported, and that may be something that not everyone thinks is really fun to think about, but is crucial. How are people getting deliveries? How are they accessing the services that they need? How are we managing waste and trash? And so we can be creative together and thoughtful together about those. So each of these 3 ideas, commerce, culture, imagining activation and creative expression and bringing forward histories and stories as well as creating new ones. The idea of care, where we're really thinking about not only safety, but bringing people together, collectively caring and building community. Climate, of course, is an important part of the opportunity and the need as we think about our urban areas. So how can we improve and think about and integrate care for our climate? And then continuity, of course, we need to get to and from, and that's not just passing through a neighborhood, but connecting into the surroundings. So very quickly, I'll just talk you through. We have put together a few examples of streets that there's no one street that is the exact replica that we would ever promote or suggest that we do here, but there are things that we can learn from other places. And we'll run through these very quickly and just highlight a couple of thoughts, but also wanted to ask you as you're listening to jot down if there's a great street or experience or place here in Atlanta or in your own travels that you can share with us that we can learn more from. So of course, many folks know the Champs-Élysées in Paris, often thought of as an iconic street. And what you may or may not know is it is currently also being re-looked at. And there are great aspects of that street that I'm sure they will not change, and they'll work to maintain the sort of beautiful, symmetrical kind of grand boulevard. But they're looking right now at how to integrate essentially smaller scale spaces, kind of literally at the street level. Like in a way, you recognize that street for the grand trees and the big moves. So ideas now are being developed on how to invite active life, integrate green and gathering, and it's not wiping it clean, it's adding that in. So that's something we can think about. This example looks maybe at a first glance like a pretty standard, simple, kind of maybe low traffic street, but something that's quite interesting about it, if you see on the image on the right, the steel bollards, those are operational, so they're working to think about how this street can be used and function differently at different times of day for different needs. So for example, service and delivery can happen at a certain time of day. At other times, that can be replaced with street activities and nightlife and different kinds of programming. So we invite you to think about different types of activities that could happen different times of day, different times of year, or maybe even for longer periods. Like there are certainly many examples where every Sunday a street becomes pedestrian and people are biking and walking. The rest of the time it sort of behaves normally. So we can think really dynamically about the street or portions of the street. A few other examples, this one in Honolulu, you I think can see that it's really sort of about inviting people to slow down and move a little bit differently. So you can see that it's not a perfectly symmetrical balanced street, that you can introduce moments or nodes for loading or for outdoor gathering or different types of activities along the way. This example is, again, kind of maybe seen as a grand boulevard, but something that really caught our attention is that we will probably talk with you about inviting variety and inviting different types of activity. Also, it can be really useful to have really designated zones. So it's not about mixing everything always and everywhere. We can think really in a sophisticated way about how you designate zones. Maybe that's for a bus lane. Maybe that's certainly drive lanes as we see today, or maybe a place for bikes and scooters. Giving clear definition can also help slow down, invite, improve safety, and we can mingle that with variety. This street maybe looks at first glance like it's a sidewalk or just a pedestrian way, but what's fascinating about this is there's this very intense and beautiful planting and designated walkway. On the perimeter of this are kind of standard drive lanes where you can, traffic is able to move, but you feel like there's a place that is a little bit different and really invites a different kind of character of scale and vegetation. Just a couple more. This example we sort of enjoy as we've been thinking about Peachtree, that there are places where small interventions can also have a big impact. So just looking for a place to maybe add some planting or to create a little collection of seating and these kind of nodes, or these, Darlene will talk a lot more about this, these kind of moments where you can have pause or really, quite frankly, make more out of a small space that maybe has been overlooked. And then this last one is kind of looking at that idea of continuity and also inviting culture and energy. So this is an example in Montreal. Continuity doesn't have to be about making uniformity in every aspect of the street, but here you see these kind of what we call the pink balls overhead, which are creating a strong identity, a sense of joy, and responding to this particular neighborhood and reflecting the dynamism of that neighborhood. It creates a sense of continuity, while all along the street there's lots of different activity and different energy happening. And a little bit along those same lines of thinking, there's different ways to bring continuity and celebrate history or culture. And so this is our last example here. There's many more that I hope you share with us. But this one, in a sense, was kind of thinking about this tapestry or a way in which you might introduce a palette of materials, whether that's paving or planting, that can act in different ways and really respond to the immediate context, but also add up to something bigger, something that you recall or you remember or you understand really ties the place together. So please, again, we're just going to keep asking you for this. We have ideas to share, but we also are very early in this process, and so if there's a place, whether it's a whole street or just a moment along a street that you think of, that you remember, we'd really love to hear about that and learn about that from you. So now I'll hand it to Darlene.
Thank you. So when we worked with Eric's office, we felt like we were a really good match. We're both multidisciplinary offices, but they took on the charge of describing the quantitative metrics of the street and how this will work. And we had the pleasure of looking at the qualitative ideas around what this could be, what happens when we get more space from a road diet. So we wanted to start to think about how people and habitat kind of coexist on Peachtree. So as you can see here, right by Pershing Point, we did these drone shots just to look at and verify kind of the traffic count and all the street space that is devoted to cars. And it was kind of a starting point for us to really think about the space of the street from building edge to building edge and not think of it just as a way of moving through quickly. And you can see just as a time-lapse kind of film script of this, that there's just a ton of space that's underutilized. And this is especially a point at Peachtree where people really tend to speed up. The setbacks are larger, the curb cuts are larger, and people are just racing to get onto the highway here. So this led us to really start to look at the available spaces. If you start to patch all of the contiguous open space together onto the space between just the building facades, left to right, you start to see this very interesting open space. And if you imagine that as a park or a garden, then you can start to laterally think of how we design this. If we don't think of it just in terms of mobility and moving from one end to another, we can start to look at the opportunities of all of these contiguous arrangements around there. So together, our team started to think about this street as a garden. And we liked that idea because it meant that we were bringing a lot of planting into the street, but also a lot of biodiversity, a lot of garden detail, and thinking about it as a night and day experience, having ambiance and having an evolving quality so that it changed during the seasons, it changes over time, and you could imagine different events happening there. We also love the history of Peachtree as this walking ridge. And when you walk along it, you understand that this, a lot more than other streets, is a landscape in itself. Because it follows this ridge line, it's got this really beautiful sway to it, and it operates on the crest moving through the city. And we like this history of it as a walking space. So we started there thinking about how to return this space to a walking space. And often in our office, we think about design as these almost like strings of pearls that you create these moments that you see ahead of you that draw you to them. And so you're always moving from one moment to another moment. And it could be something temporary that happens on the street in an open space. It could be a cluster of trees. It could be some beautiful piece of furniture that's attached to a museum or an institution. We also really loved that Peachtree had this asymmetry to it, that we weren't bounded by kind of the formal regularity of the Champs-Élysées or kind of these beautiful European streets that were designed by dictators, that, you have the Terminus and the Arc de Triomphe and soldiers march through. Oh, it's because I was speaking French. One moment. Siri. But we love the freeing opportunity that allowed, that we could build on this asymmetry and create this weave with ecology and movement from one side of the street to the other. And again, imagining the whole street, so you're not relegated to the east or the west, but really thinking about those pearls existing in the retail sphere and in the public realm. And then when we thought about this street and designing it like a garden, we thought about planting it like a garden. That you kind of plant something, you plant a seed of an idea, or you plant something in real life, and it grows and evolves over time, so that you'll revisit the street and see how it's developed, how it's matured, and how the built environment has matured with it. And so when we started to look at this walking rhythm, or this string of pearls that we were had in mind, we noticed that they coincided nicely with these nodes and these green spaces that are already there. And there were these natural junctures that gave us opportunities to pause, to see what's ahead, and to be interested to explore more. And so looking at that again, we created these kind of fanciful collage vignettes and had a lot of fun doing them. But they were about opening up our minds to what could exist there and the opportunities that may be found. So we're inviting you to look at these collages that we're about to show, not as real propositions for what's happening, but to open up our minds and to generate ideas for what you would like to see there. So now we're going to go into the opportunities. Peachtree has beautiful trees, and I'm from Canada, and it's an incredibly green and lush and beautiful street. It's not just that it feels shaded and green, but the structure of the trees create these beautiful spaces in themselves. And so we looked at the street like landscape architects creating a garden. We looked at the existing conditions of the trees and checked the arborist reports, and then mapped all the trees and their species and their configurations and their sizes onto the plan to look at where we could start to understand opportunities for occupying space or adding space on, or to improve these spaces that are already there. So we looked at it in plan first, and then transposed that to an axonometric so that we could see the real spatial relationships. And then we started to design these diagrams, and these are all the existing conditions of what you have there. So if we pull away kind of all the kind of junky stuff on the street, all the signs that you don't want to see, all the trash cans and all of that, if we start to look at just the street as a space and the adjoining green spaces, it's sort of an interesting study. And so we're going to come back to you with our instigations for these streets now, but these are just the existing conditions to give us an idea of what is possible here. We've also, as you can see, flattened the buildings, and not to undermine the presence of street walls here, but to think about the building as it relates to the street and the ground floor, and how they exist as sometimes contiguous spaces. So in the red triangles, you can see the entrances here. And so we're looking at opportunities of how these spaces and the ground floor relate to these open spaces on the street. We're also obviously looking at connections to existing art that's on the street, to MARTA stations, to existing bike paths. And we're really interested in these areas, especially around the High Museum, around MODA, and these underused green open spaces that we walked by today, thinking about freeing the trees. And so you look at these spaces, especially, the success around Colony Square and across the street, if you think about ping-ponging across that street in this asymmetrical way, you start to understand the opportunities here. We've also represented the street in its kind of correct topographical sway to it. So it's got this kind of lateral kind of dance move, but it also has the ridge lines that are clearly felt. And then I think this is the last one. Obviously, the opportunities around the Fox Theater. We've looked at kind of drone shots of people exiting the theater on special evenings, on events, and seeing everyone pour out into the roadbed itself. So obviously, we want to understand the uses of these buildings and historic buildings and how we can support those institutions. And so this isn't, as Eric said, this isn't just an independent study. We're building on the Public Life Action Plan, and we see that as setting a framework for this study. And we've taken the 8 kind of key takeaways from the Public Life Action Plan and tried to respond to those in these collages that we're showing here. So, we obviously want to instill the streetscape with energy and vibrancy, all, through the day and through the evening hours. And so this collage at 15th Street Open Space starts to talk about how, with very simple means and lighting, we can create spaces that are inviting and into the evening. With the residential numbers and the hotel numbers that Eric expressed, there should be a lot more activity on the street and into the evening. Then we looked at these kind of axonometrics, and so you can see below is the before condition, and exploded on top is kind of the after condition. And we're starting to look at how to program these spaces and how to be a little specific about what can happen where. And this is a way for us to start to pinpoint where things should happen and get your impact on those. So, whether there are flexible spaces used for loading, expanded planting edges or performance areas, more shade, they're all things that we want to hear more about. This is a really fun collage that we did in the office in the High Street Museum lawn. We've invited goats here and cricket players and performance artists. And obviously this isn't realistic, but it was a way for us to really get out of kind of what's happened here before and see what you would like to see happen here. We think it's kind of an underused space and want to, dream up ideas for that space. We're also looking at things that don't cost a lot of money, not just large moves, but these kind of small moves of biodiversity and habitat and things that bring joy to residents every day. In our office, we created these, we designed these beehives that are not meant to, you're not meant to harvest any honey from them. They're just for the bees. And they were installed on a rooftop in Norway. So there are little things like this that can bring joy to people. We're also looking at, really strategically placing fun lighting and the power of lighting to change a space and to create joy and gathering and invite people to stay out during the evening. This is another axonometric of the Fox Theater area in that block, imagining that those trees are the willows right beside the Fox Theater are freed from their fencing and laminated onto the space beside the Fox Theater. What a great public space that would be. And then this really fun collage that Daniel in our office did, reinforcing how important storefronts are for these vibrant public spaces and how impactful fun lighting can be. And then this is the area at the Federal Reserve and those lacebark elms. It's a beautiful alley of trees there, but thinking about how we can introduce planting edges, informal gathering, seating, and placemaking, and start to expand the history of the Federal Reserve space out onto the street and invite people into that space. And so here's a little collage of how that will work. And again, these art installations on the ground could be temporary, they could be seasonal, they could be there for an event. And so thinking about how to prioritize space and reprogram space in the street to rebalance it with people and cars. And then again about rebalancing mobility to allow for more human-friendly streets. So we're not just talking about safety here and crossing streets, but actually inviting people with things that they want to see, those kinds of pearls that you're moving towards, and that could be furniture or planting or an area of respite. And then finally, we created this kind of fun collage about how to supercharge life from Gail's challenge to us. And what we wanted to get out of this collage was not, not an actual vision of what we're planning, but the idea of taking parts of Peachtree's history and past, whether it's colors or the way that people have used the street or the amount of people on the street, and bringing that into our new design. And so we'd like to wrap up with these questions about provocation. What do you want to see? How do you want to see your personal histories or the histories that you understand if you're from here or you've moved here? Do you want to see places for plants, places for animals, performances, dance parties, parades, outdoor movies, places for cars, places for car shows, places for community and people? Thank you.
Thank you, Darlene and team. We've obviously have a lot to chew on here. I think it's probably become obvious that our approach for this work is not typical for a street design. It's not being led by traffic numbers today, by the engineering. We wanted to get to what do we want Peachtree to be, ultimately. We will get into the engineering part, but that's not where we're starting. And so, I want to thank you all for being here. we are going to continue this conversation with you. We're done with the presentation part, so thanks for bearing with us. Now is where we want to hear from you. And we're going to do this in a little bit more informal way, where the team is going to be spread throughout the room, in the front, in the back, and you're welcome to come up and ask us questions. More so, tell us what you think. What's resonated with you? And what are your challenges, or what do you think are opportunities for us? So, you've got your postcards. We're going to keep telling you to fill out your postcard. You can leave those with us if you have a question or a comment. Again, this is the first of several. If you would like a more in-depth conversation with us, let us know. We will schedule that. If you represent a building, an organization, let us know. We're happy to set those meetings up. So with that, let's break for a conversation. Thank you.